Did you get the,
No.
Matt, you look like you're getting ready to testify in a trial. Smile a little bit.
You're in the right meeting here.
Looking at portfolios through the the scriptures, looking at my notes. All's good here. Yep.
it's in Google.
Well, just to be clear, we're waiting on John to get hooked up to Zoom. Or are we going?
Oh,
Now
he
he's-
just disappeared. Yeah, now he's gone. I think Kristen, it sounded like Kristen in the background was helping.
Okay.
There he is. There he is. Hi, John.
Hey, there
There
you
he is.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We apologize for the delay, the technologically driven delay here, but we are good to go. So this regular monthly meeting of the Mesa County Federal Mineral Leasing District will come to order. At this time, is there any general public comment? Hearing none, I will ask for the approval of the agenda as delineated in the staff report that was given to us by Dusty.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Next item is the adoption of the May meeting minutes. Has the board had the opportunity to look at the minutes that were submitted to us? If so, I'll entertain a motion.
I would move we approve those minutes as written.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Staff report.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. To the staff report. Okay. So in June, we posted to our social media about our meeting minutes being posted. We had the meeting agenda, the new Zoom meeting details. We live streamed our Zoom meeting on Facebook also. And then we sent out a press release after the spring grants were awarded, and we got coverage in the Daily Sentinel and the business briefs. And we also shared photos on the fire department with their fire training facility. We did get 2 news stories. The one was done by Goldine Brown on KKCO on the Spring Grant Awards. It didn't get uploaded to their website for me to share, but we also had the Daily Sentinel, and that's one I did share. The grants requesting payments is the Town of Palisade brush truck, which finishes out all of our old grants. It's a final grant payment request of $63,000. And this is the truck that they purchased with it from Texas. And then the May invoices are for Dusty Reimer, invoice 147 for services and supplies for $3,789.97. And for Dufford Waldeck, invoice 20447 for $1,060. And our upcoming events are the board meeting in July. It's on July 15th. Our audit will be due to the state on the 31st of July, and they'll most likely be presenting at our next board meeting the results of the audit. Our grant cycle opens August 1st, following our August 19th board meeting. And that's what I have for you guys.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the 2 invoices included in Dusty's report?
Oh, and the grant.
Oh, and the grant, and the final grant payment. Sorry, thank you.
I would make a motion we approve the 2 items.
And the payment of the grant?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Motion carries. Review of the financials for May.
Under the balance sheet, for the fund balance, we have $713,976.13. And then under the permanent fund, we have $1,611,961.49. And then under the grants payable, the balance is $263,000. And then moving on to the profit and loss, which will have our net income for the month. It includes the $200,000 of grants awarded, contract services of $3,750, dues and memberships of $24.98. And we also have unrealized gain of $56,255.87. Dividend income, interest earned of 6 cents and dividend income of $1,269.73 for a net loss of $146,249.32. And for the next report, the AP aging summary, we have the City of Fruita for $50,000, Grand Junction Police Department for $150,000, and Town of Palisade for $63,000. In May. Under the budget to actual, the main thing that changed here was that we included the grants awarded for $200,000. And then total expenses still is under the budget by $57,763.75. And the rest is pretty much same as the prior month. That's it.
Questions from the board regarding the May financials?
No.
Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion for approval.
I move we approve the financials as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you, gentlemen. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Review of investment accounts for May. Matt?
Yeah, so the actual balance on the portfolio as of the close yesterday is 1.653 million, which is a gain of about 165,000. And we haven't really made a lot of changes during the month of May. It was a good month for the markets, though. The S&P 500 was up just shy of 8%. International developed and emerging markets both up, and the 10-year Treasury basically stayed flat during the month at 0.66, although now it's about 0.75%. Interestingly, the yield curve has steepened a little bit with the 30-year going up a little over 1.5. And then oil finally bounced back, which was nice. We're kind of around $38 a barrel on July futures. So right now, I think what's going on in the market is people are basically buying stocks for 2021 and 2022 because obviously earnings and just general economic conditions are going to be pretty bad this year. But I think a lot of people have made the mistake of pulling out in the past, and it's like, get our money in. It doesn't matter where things are right now. In a couple of years from now, we'll see the effect of, what could be $4 to $6 trillion in stimulus hit the economy. So I think equities are the place to be. Our portfolio is almost exactly 65%, which is our max equity allocation. And I know we talked about this maybe 2 meetings ago, how there's a little bit of leeway, I think a quarter, that if we go over that, we can kind of let it ride for a quarter or so. So I'd like to do that. And if we get, maybe up a little too high, like 68 to 70%, we can do a rebalance. But otherwise, I feel a lot better about the equities in our portfolio than I do the bonds, which is, I just, I'll throw my hands up. I have no idea what's going to happen in the bond market right now. The government is buying bonds, keeping yields low, and they're supposed to end that in September. Who knows? So I think that's probably my main takeaway is let's leave the equity allocation at 65, which we're about exactly right now again. We'll drift a little bit higher than that, which is outside of the investment policy statement, but as long as we have kind of a quarter to adjust that, we'll get it back down. So it's kind of the summary, but if there's questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Questions for Matt?
A lot of the slides I'll point out that what Dusty's showing right now is as of the month end. So the data I'm giving you was basically as of yesterday, closed yesterday.
Yeah, right here, May 31st.
Yeah, so if the numbers like that portfolio balance there, it shows 1.612. That's actually 1.665. Yeah.
Questions from the board?
No.
No, I don't have any, Craig.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve Matt's investment report for May.
I move we accept the investment report for May.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Item 7, approval of spring grant contracts.
Yeah.
Dusty.
Chris finished up the contracts and we sent them out on Friday. I dropped them off for you, Craig. We did get one back. It was the City of Fruita. It was signed already, and we're still waiting on the City of Grand Junction, but they are ready to be initiated by the board.
So do we need, I mean, we've already approved these, Chris, but do we need to approve the contracts themselves? Is that what we're doing?
My suggestion is, yeah, that you go ahead and just approve the contracts if you're comfortable with them. There's always a risk that the City of Grand Junction might have some change that they want. They have done that in the past sometimes, but we're very, very close to what our tradition, or, what our typical contract form is. So I don't anticipate any problems with them. And I suppose if there was a glitch, the worst that could happen is we need to bring it back to you next time. But if the board's comfortable, I'm fine with approving them. The one from Fruita has already been signed by the City of Fruita, so that is not an issue. If the board's comfortable, we could approve both of them.
So do I have the Fruita signed one? Dusty?
Yeah. He sent it over electronically, so I printed the signed copy that he had. So yours will be a complete contract when you sign it.
So I guess I would entertain a motion for the approval of the spring grant contracts and authorize me to execute them on behalf of the Federal Mineral Leasing District.
I would make a motion to approve the contracts and sign them if that's what you're looking for.
Yes, sir.
Second that.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so I'll sign them and have them in the drive up for you, Dusty. Is that how we're doing it?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
And then Chris, I'll scan them in and then I'll get you guys copies of it too.
That'd be great.
Item 8, discussion and possible approval of grant application changes. There's a couple of things that the more I score these grant applications, there's a couple of things that are bothering me a little bit. The question number 1 says, does energy extraction create physical impacts that affect your organization? 2, how do the social impacts of energy extraction affect your organization? every time I score an application, and maybe it's just me, but every time I score an application, I look at them and say, we're asking the same question twice. I get that the one is a physical impact and the other one is a social impact. But at the end of the day, it seems to me like we just want them to describe how energy extraction has impacted their organization. Maybe it is physical, maybe it's social, maybe it's both. But it seems to me like every time, when I'm in one of these meetings, I get the fact that they may be two different things, but honestly, when I'm scoring those applications, I always just shake my head and say, why are we asking the same question twice? Because we get the same answer. They answer both questions the same way.
Craig, I would agree. I don't see why we don't just have one question that asks, how does energy extraction affect your organization? It seems like one question would fit that bill.
John?
Yeah, I agree with that, but it also seems to me that there are some very, very creative answers that they put down there that are hard for me to believe that this is the impact that sometimes what they portray is kind of like, you talk about stretching the truth and I guess they're making lemonade out of orange juice, or out of lemon juice, I guess, but they're pretty creative answers, and I would like to see a little bit more, I don't know what.
Well, and
better justification of why you're entitled to money.
I think that's where our scoring comes into effect, when we've got, I don't know about you guys, but when I've got an application that they're really stretching it, that's where I give them a lower score.
Do you guys, here's a question I want to ask too. Would it bother you if they said they had no impacts whatsoever? Because we've had somebody answer before that they actually weren't impacted by energy extraction at all, and they got 0 scores, and it was almost a futile grant because they said they had no impacts. Would that deter the board? Would you guys want them to have some sort of an impact, that they have to answer that question, or does that not?
Speaking just for me, not the board, yes, it would have an impact on how I would score that grant. I deem my role here in scoring these that we're supposed to be, these are energy extraction dollars. They came from that industry. They are intended to benefit the communities that are impacted by that. And so if we went down the road of not, having that answer there scored, I'm not sure that we'd be doing our job correctly, the way I understand it.
Yeah, I'd agree with Craig on that.
Do you think that they should have to show some type of a impact to be able to fill out the application?
I think some of them address that, but they're also very creative in their answers, and I guess personally, I score them kind of based on how I see what their answer is, and if I think it's stretching the truth, they're not going to get as high a score as the one that has a honest, legitimate case of justification of why they're entitled to money.
Yeah, I remember when the board, and I've said this before, but I always refer back to what we were told when the FML district was formed. And because this question was central to the mission of what we were supposed to be doing. And so the county attorney at the time, I remember that because, you know, in the enabling legislation, there was language there and, you know, in our bylaws and that kind of stuff. And so the question was asked of the county attorney, well, what exactly do you mean by, you know, what qualifies? And he thought about it for a second and he said, the riverfront trail qualifies. And we all kind of looked at him and said, what does that have to do with energy extraction? And he said, these are dangerous jobs that have, you know, long shifts, and some of these folks are away from their families for an extended period of time. He said, you could easily accept the argument that energy extraction affects these folks to the point where they need the riverfront trail to be able to, you know, sort of, you know, relax and enjoy the fruits of their labor a little bit. And so his point being, if the riverfront trail qualifies, find me something that doesn't. And so it's all in how they answer those questions, to John's point, and we score them accordingly. I mean, there are, you know, we've scored grants that affected an intersection in a community that was heavily traveled by energy extraction vehicles. That's a pretty direct impact there, and those grant requests were scored accordingly and I think awarded. But I think we can get there with scoring. So to answer your question, Dustin, just from me, on behalf of the board, I'm okay with them applying for the grants if they legally can and answering that question, and the three scorers will determine, each one will determine on their own how far that goes towards meeting the mission.
Which is what they've done. But if somebody, I guess my actual question was, is I've literally had somebody come to me and say, we actually don't have any impacts. So they would answer no. And you guys are okay with that?
Then their score will be adjusted accordingly.
Right, and I've said that, but because I didn't want to say like one or the other, but I just wanted to see if that was something that you guys wanted to make sure that question gets answered. Because that's kind of the two questions right now that'll sink or float any grant are these two questions, and it deals with energy impact. And basically, you're right, kind of however they get answered, both of them, you guys tend to score about the same with it, and those tend to be, it's, you know, 20 points out of the application is about your impact right off the bat. So on a mini grant, that's huge.
I say we go to one question, but more points awarded to that question. The same number of points, but
so 20 points for the one question.
Yes.
Does the board want to give applicants any guidance in connection with that question? Because Greg, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a range of impacts, from very direct mineral impacts associated with a road project in Quebec where the gas trucks go up and down that road every day, to recreation facilities on the other extreme. Do you want to give some guidance to applicants to say that you know, a range of potential impacts are appropriate for consideration, and it'll be scored accordingly?
Yeah, I think that's good, Chris, because that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, we've never taken the point of view that if you're unless you can show an absolute direct impact from oil and gas activity, you don't qualify. The board has traditionally kind of had a fairly liberal interpretation of that, saying that, as you pointed out, recreation facilities, other types of facilities in the community where oil and gas workers live can qualify. And legally, I think they do qualify because they're public facilities. And so then it gets back to the scoring question of what different board members rate that particular project relative to others.
Yeah, I'm following Quint's idea there. I guess my problem is we kind of always try to avoid situations where a scorer could push an application over the top, you know, and having that 20-point emphasis on that one question could literally decide, you know, if a score, if one of us scored that 0, that grant's not going to, mathematically, that grant's not going to get funded. And if you know, one of us scored it at 20, it probably is. And I worry, here's what I'm trying to say. I worry that it gives one scorer the opportunity to use too big of a hammer.
Yeah, it would affect the median.
Yeah, that's been a potential concern, is that someone could, if they just decided they just didn't like a project, they could derail it by giving it a 0 on any one criteria. Which I suppose you have that right to do.
Yeah, if they give a 0, they actually have to give an explanation as to why they've given it 0. And no, since I've been on, I've never seen that. But even if everybody else scores at 15 and they give 1, it's, you know, it's kind of a done deal.
May I make a possible suggestion here? Can you free float the points so that whatever you score each of the questions, the total will be 100%? And then no one question will necessarily hold that 20-point advantage.
In other words, instead of your idea there, Benita, was instead of having a potential for 80, the potential would be for 100.
Well, but you're going to take all of the questions. There's what, 4 of them? Well,
there's 8.
So there's 8 for the traditional, and there's 6 for a mini grant.
Okay, so in total, that's 100%. So you just free float. You as commissioners give any specific question a total, maybe 15 points or 23 points. It's all free floating, so that, but the total, it has to be 100% at the end. 100 points.
So that means that you're awarding all the points to add up to 100%. So then they would all score, they would all score like 80, or they all score 60. It just in different categories. So it doesn't actually give us a score then.
No,
everybody win.
No, you're giving your whole question, your whole question panel 100 points, and then you free float those questions as to what you think they're worth. I might think one question might be 15 points, but you, Dusty, might think it's 23 points. But the next question we might agree on, there might be 20 points. But the bottom line is, we have, at the end, we have 100 points that we've given out. Does that make sense? So there's no specific amount of points per question that's hard and fast concrete. That gives you guys a lot more leeway as to determine what particular question you've determined to be more important to this particular contract. So it gives the people who are writing these things a little more leeway to explain from a more liberal point of view on how to interpret the question of whether there's impacts.
Thank you, Benita.
Mhm.
You know, I guess my concern there is the way we're going at it right now, where each question has the same point value, is when we do that, the average score that between the three of us, when Dusty presents that to us there, it's meaningful. That's the average of what the three of us decided. It doesn't give any more weight to any one of us than the other. It seems to me like that your your idea makes it even worse, that somebody could say, I on question 8, I'm giving that 100%. And so it can shoot it out of whack. Whereas the way we're trying to do this is weight those scores across the three of us to come up with something that's fair. And whether we're doing that or not is subject to question. But
Craig, if you gave the last question 100%, that means the other questions had to get 0. That's the only way that could happen if you free float.
Yeah, but the point is, one of those, that particular grant got 100% score from somebody.
Craig, this is slightly off topic, but your point was to combine questions 1 and 2. If we did that, we have one last question in the mix, and the question, I guess, for the board is, would there be another question that might be more appropriate, or that would give you more information to help you in scoring? And one thing I was thinking about was, sometimes we had applications where it's pretty clear that only a few people were going to be benefited, or I can think of examples where it was an entity that maybe only benefited a few households in a particular area, or something like that. Would questions that describe the number of people who might either use or benefit from the improvement, would that be helpful to you?
Yeah, maybe something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea.
But maybe not just a number, maybe they just explain how it affects the community overall, or what parts of the community it affects, maybe that way.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if it's like, for example, if it were road improvements, the city or town could say, this road has 10,000 average vehicle trips every day, and that's why we need to fix it. And that might be useful to you, as opposed to some other grant application where they say, we serve 100 people, or this facility is used by 200 people a month, or whatever. To some degree, you're dealing with apples and oranges, but that might be something that would be helpful to you if it's a particularly heavily used facility. That might influence where you should spend your money, as opposed to something that's maybe peripheral and not used very much.
I think that's a good idea.
Is that question 3 though?
Let's see what is. Yeah, that talks about how it will enhance our community. I suppose there are people that will say, well, we serve 10,000 people a year, or 100,000, whatever. Do you get those kinds of numerical responses, Dusty?
We get them all over the board. And honestly, the people that have done really well in kind of quantifying that have been like the city of Ferda, when they've done, it's exactly you said, like the Clifton Sanitation District has been really good about putting in those numbers of households per area on the lines. Like they do a really good job of putting the data and the numbers in to show that, versus, an essay format of, we believe it's going to create positive, whatever, feel good feelings versus like, they're like, we know really will impact this many people in this section, in this area. So there are a couple of them that do a really good job of showing that when they fill out their grants.
Well, we could try to rejigger those questions and maybe combine 1 and 2, and then ask for some kind of a numerical quantification question and keep 3 as sort of a qualitative question.
Well, it almost looks like 1 is a separate physical one, and 2 and 3 almost seem like they deal with the social parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could argue that 1, 2, and 3, you're asking the same.
Pretty much the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we collapsed 1 and 2 into what Clint said of how does energy extraction affect your organization, and then have that next question, how will this project help fulfill the mission to enhance positive social and economic impact from mineral development and extraction? Please be specific with numbers if possible.
Yeah.
With statistics or numbers or something like that.
Yeah, we could try to parenthetically say that we're asking for quantitative data to explain that
Right.
answer.
Number 4, is it okay if we move on?
Yeah.
Everybody okay? Number 4, I like that question. That's always one of my favorites because we get to decide the long-term benefit. These, as my predecessor as chairman, David Ludlam, used to say, these are finite resources with a limited life. And we need to have our, head in the game and our eye on the ball and do what's good for do the long-term right thing with these scarce dollars that we have. So I think number 4 is a great question.
Yeah.
The first sentence in that section 4, when
Yeah.
David made the statement that today the industry has changed so much that stuff that was impossible to extract when that statement was made is possible today. But the biggest threat to this is we're going to get regulated out of business before you run out of natural gas.
Yeah, I think David's position was always that because each molecule, when it comes out of the ground, it gets sold once and used, and we get a royalty off of it. That money never comes back once it's been once it's been sold. And I think David's approach was always, let's sink our grant resources into projects that have a long useful life as opposed to say equipment that may wear out in 2 or 3 years. The difference between building a building and buying a police car. That was always his emphasis.
No, I understand that, but every time I read it, it's just irritating to me that you can't tell me when we're going to run out, because whenever it was 15 years ago, they knew the oil, and it's not in the state of Colorado, but up there in the Dakotas, they knew that product was in the ground. They couldn't get to it. And when they figured out a way to get to it, and we went from being in the early 2000s, the late 90s, I had experts at the Energy Expo telling everybody almost gleefully, we're going to be out of oil production in the U.S. by 2005 or 2007. Guess what? Today we're like energy independent. So when you make these statements long-term, that one is kind of erroneous, I think.
Well, John, that's not necessarily so. Every day, fewer and fewer of those minerals are accessible.
Yeah, I understand you can't extract
Every time we have a Wilderness Act, fewer of those minerals are accessible, and with a lot of the new regulations. So yeah, I mean, under the ground, there's a huge amount of gas and oil available, but every day I come to work, more and more of it is has become inaccessible. So yeah, that statement is not untrue.
So, John, do you want to do something with number 4, or
I mean, it's just, it always, when I read it, I'm kind of, I know what it's saying,
Sure.
but from when David made the statement to today, we can't say we're closer to the end of the product because we've used 10 years of extracting out of the ground, and I'm not so sure that we're 10 years closer to running out.
makes sense?
That only makes sense to me, probably.
If it's okay if we move on, and then
Yeah.
my next problem is the way we do number 5 and number 7. So I think number 6 is a perfectly legitimate question, and I like having it there. How, how are you going to maintain this in the future? But
That's a very important question.
they could answer with number 5 about, okay, here's how our part of this is being funded. And you say, boy, that sounds good. That's a 10. You get down to 7 down there, and they say, we're going to get this the last part of the grant that we talked about in number 5, we're going to get in September. Well, at that point, they don't have the funding. You get the gist of the plan, but you could actually score 5, a 10, and 7, a 0. You'd have to explain it to Dusty, but you could do it. And whereas I think it's this, again, I think the question should be, how is this project being funded, and have all funds been secured? Just ask that one question.
Mm-hmm.
And just make that number 5. Okay?
Yep.
I would agree with that.
Because it doesn't matter what their dream of how it's being funded is. If they don't have it in place, we can't give that a good score because they don't have it in place.
Yeah, that goes back to the longstanding policy of having a shovel-ready project.
Exactly.
If they had all the money in place, they wouldn't need a grant. They could just do it.
Well, that's the other side of that.
Well, but I'm talking about the match.
Right.
All
Numerous times it's been, well, we're applying for DOLA. We'll find out in September if DOLA has awarded us our money. So it's in the works. They're planning on it, but it hasn't been committed.
Okay, so, but here's my problem with that. All right.
Oh, no, I was just restating what you said. That's what you're saying. Like, that's what we get a lot of times and stuff like that.
Right.
Right.
Yep. And what that does, you may love this grant, and you'd say, okay, I love this grant so much, I'm going to score this well. I hope my fellow board members score it well. And if it takes them 2 years to get the rest of the money, that's okay. This is worth it. Meanwhile, we may be excluding with our scoring as Chris says, a shovel-ready project that's ready to go. And we've said no to you. But this one scored really well, and that other one may never happen if they don't get those matching funds. So I think it leads us down a road that I don't like going down. I think it's one question, ask the whole thing, and we'll score it accordingly. But if they don't have the funding in place for it, I don't see how we can give it a very high score. Gentlemen?
Craig, I agree with you. I've some of these were, I just hate the idea of, I look at some of these and I hate the idea of giving money to a project that all the other money isn't lined up, because, it goes to waste. Somebody else could be using that money.
John?
Pardon?
Do you have anything you want to add?
No.
So I don't think we want to take formal action, but I guess what we would like is for you guys to take our suggestions here and sort of propose a new scoring questions.
Okay.
And
Yeah, why don't we, we'll kind of tinker. I've been making some pretty good notes, and then Dusty has too. Why don't we tinker with this draft and come back to you with a revised set of questions? You can decide if you like it or if you want further changes.
I like number 8. I think that's an important question. But it would also be nice, so we're going from 8 questions down to 6. So it would be nice if we could come up with 2 additional questions or something like that.
Okay.
So we'll get after you're done, Craig, we'll get or after Dusty and Chris are done, we'll get a sample to review. Do we want to have just some comment online via email, or do we, I guess we really can't do that. We'll just address it at the next meeting, right?
If necessary, if Chris and Dusty want us to have a workshop, we could do that. We've done a pretty good job today during our normal meeting. It's not a grant cycle, and it's taken us a little bit of time, but I'm all right with dealing with it in our July board meeting if Chris doesn't see any problems with that.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that at all. You could, if you wanted to, you could, we could circulate the revised draft, and if you wanted to get comment from the grant community, the grantee community, we could do that. To me, the question is really what information does this board need to make good decisions, and we're trying to package that for you. And so if you think of something else, if there's another question or something that we're just not touching on that we should, please put a bug in our ear, because I always think about, you guys are looking at these projects and trying to figure out how to score them. And maybe there's a question we're not asking that we should be asking.
I'm sure there is.
And to some degree, a lot of this, I mean, it's always going to be imperfect. All you can do is try to package it up uniformly so that each board member can apply what he or she thinks is the best criteria.
Well, speaking just for me, the presentations have helped me more than anything. That's been, I've always tried to drive out there or over there or wherever and look at it, but to have them actually present it, and that has helped me immensely when scoring this stuff. So I know it's a pain for them, but it sure helps me score, get a better, handle on what they're wanting to do with that application.
I think the presentations have been a good idea.
It's helped us. It's made us better. So anything else on item 8?
My suggestion is that if anybody turns in an incomplete application or any questions are missing, to just not accept it. Change the wording of that. So they should be able to tell us who they are and what they want. And if everybody does it, then they have done it, then we should just continue moving forward, and we just change the language in the application to make sure that's straightforward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think we should have to go through the trouble of the presentation and scoring it if it's an incomplete application. Do you gentlemen agree?
I agree.
Yes.
Thank you. Good.
Those were my only ones. Just changing that. And whatever traditional grant questions that we change, we'll have to change the mini grant questions too, because they're basically all the same
Right.
questions. There's just a few less because we're not asking for, they're not asking for a whole lot more. So, but it would still, the first four are all the same questions that we have for the traditional grants. And, you know, maybe that's what we look at, you know, number 6 has got the funding all put in there. Kind of change that one too.
I like number 6, the way it is.
Okay.
Just speaking for me, you know, we're trying to fund things that matter and the dollars that we're funding now are so small that, you know, they don't matter as much as they used to, but hopefully we'll get back to bigger grants. But I think it's an important thing for them to think about and respond to us on how they're going to, you know, pay the operating costs going forward. I like it.
You're talking 6 on the mini grants, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she was talking.
Yeah.
No,
Six on the
yeah,
mini
I'm talking
grants.
about like, yeah, on 6. I think it's the same question.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, same as.
Yep.
Yeah.
Similar. Okay.
I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
No, you're good. So we'll, do you guys have, is there anything different that you guys consider with the grants when it comes to like looking at a mini grant versus a traditional grant? I mean, I know the money's different and usually the timeline is too, but I mean, is there any big impacts or other questions that you guys have that you wish you could ask, or
Well,
that Chris had said?
With question number 4, the useful life, I think all 3 of us understand that the useful life of a mini grant is not going to be the same as the useful life of a larger grant. It's still, I think, an important question to ask, but I don't think it's as, you know, it's a different question.
We're going to score it based on the other mini grants, not necessarily, you know.
Oh, the other question I was going to ask was this: are you guys still okay with having one entity submit 2 grants for both a mini and a traditional?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's worked out when we've had it before. We
Okay.
worked our way around that.
I think it's okay. The thing I like about the mini grant is that they have to have quite a bit of their own money in it. Smaller projects, and a lot of times these smaller projects to me are just as important as the large ones, that one entity gets a lot of money and this spreads it around more, and I like that.
Right. So if we ever get to a point where everybody's kind of submitted both a traditional and a mini, is that going to be an issue if it's the same for the same stuff?
Have we ever funded a traditional and a mini to the
No,
same?
because you can't. So if they win one, they can't get the other. But if they're just duplicating, so they'll turn in one for a traditional, even though they have to have a higher match versus a mini, there's no issues if they're doing both.
For the same project?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a problem with that. I think
Okay.
they got different projects.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
I guess they can they apply for the 2? I don't want to give one organization a mini and a regular grant in the same cycle.
Yeah, they can't. So if they can get one versus the other. So our instance is the town of Palisade applied for radio equipment and then the brush truck. They got the brush truck, so they automatically disqualified them for the radio equipment, and they were in the running for a high mini grant for that as well. And then this last time, the town of DeBeck, their school district, applied for a mini bus in both the traditional and the mini. So it was the same project, but both settings. So it's just something to be aware of if people are going to start doing that. It may become a trend. Didn't know if there was.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to score those projects. You're kind of, do I want to score this for the mini grant, or do I want to score it in relation to the other projects for the traditional grant? I don't know. It may make it harder for the board. It adds one more criteria in. Well, you know, they've got a second bite in when we score the mini grants if they don't get it for the traditional grant. Maybe you want to discourage that kind of gaming.
And it's not like we have a bunch of money waiting for
Exactly.
people to apply.
It's just something to think about. Like I said, we've seen it come up twice now with our two most recent grant cycles. I just wanted to throw that out there for discussion. We can, and we may need not to do anything. People may just not do it, but it's just, it's popping up now. I wanted you guys.
It'll probably be more. You think we'll probably see more and more of this if we don't change that?
I don't know about that. It's potentially, it's just something to keep on the horizon. Like I said, there's not, the only thing it says in there is that you can apply for both a traditional and a mini from the same entity. There's nothing in there that says it's got to be for different projects. It just says if you win one, you can't win the other. Like if you get if you win the traditional, you can't get the mini. Obviously, if you're going to get the mini, you're probably not getting the traditional. So I'm not sure if people, now that they're seeing you can apply for both now, if they will do it, but it's just something to think about. Could be a discussion for another grant cycle next year, but.
So what you're saying is you think it would be beneficial for us just to clear that up and say you can apply for the traditional or you can apply for the mini, but you cannot apply for one entity. The same entity can apply for both in the same grant cycle.
I don't know. That's for you guys to discuss. It seemed a little strange when it came through.
The same project?
Yeah, it was the same project. I mean, I thought it was a little strange, but if you guys were okay with it, then I'm okay with it. I just, like I said, wanted to make you guys aware that it's starting to happen more often. So.
Okay.
If you guys have a feeling on it one way or another, or if you don't, that's okay. I just thought we'd just throw it out there for discussion to see how you guys felt about it.
Well, the more I think about it, if they're trying to sell us on this application, this concept for this project, and they think enough of it to go to all the trouble to fill out the paperwork and come to the presentation and do all that, I think they should pick one or the other. They ought to apply for the mini or apply for the traditional, not both, for the same project.
Okay.
I concur with that.
All right.
And not for the same project. I agree. Okay.
So they can still apply. It just should be for different projects.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think the last one was, if you guys are okay with it, projects in process.
Yeah, the ones where they already have the money. I think
If they've already started it, they want to know if, since they've already started it, if they can apply for it. And they're in the middle of a project and they wouldn't get an award until, the month after. That was a question that we actually got this time around too, that we'd never had before, where it's up to you guys. We've never done it before, but we wanted to have an open discussion that people have actually wanted to know if.
And, when we talked about this at the staff level, that was sort of an admission on the part of the applicant that they really didn't need the money if they've already commenced construction of it. And I could see, why waste this board's time trying to score an application when there are people who desperately need the money and can't do a project without your grant, as opposed to another party that already has the money because they've already started building whatever it is they want to get money for.
A very legitimate point. Yeah, I don't think they should be able to apply for a grant for an in-progress project. Just speaking for me.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, if you got enough money to start the project and you're underway, just go ahead and spend your money. But that also goes back to the question that, do you have enough money to do the project? And we're willing to look at that though, I guess.
Yeah, but they could score really well on that because they had the money to do the project.
Right. Well,
Is
there's
it
kind of
alright? Yes.
there's kind of a sweet spot there. You
Yeah.
don't want to have all the money you need that you could have already commenced construction, but you also don't want to have a speculative project where there's no way you can do it because you don't have all the funds committed from other sources. You want something that's sort of in the middle. You're pretty close to being able to do it if this grant goes forward. And I guess that's what we'll have to balance in these questions.
An additional question just popped into my head that might be interesting and might not be. Because we've asked them how their organization, or we're going to ask them, how their organization has been impacted, and please try and give us, numbers. What about a question that just said, please describe how everyone in Mesa County will benefit from this project?
There aren't any of those.
Yeah, there are.
Well,
Make them think big.
yeah.
Okay, so how is this going to benefit everyone in Mesa County? And if it doesn't, then maybe that's something the scorers need to look at. I don't know. Just throwing that out there for discussion. Because I don't think with elimination of 2 questions, I don't think we're asking enough questions.
No.
Just a thought. Judging from my fellow board members, I don't think it was a very good one.
I was just thinking, I like where it's going. I was just thinking if there's a better way to ratchet it down a little bit.
I was going to use the E word and say, how does this project economically benefit everyone in Mesa County? But there are other benefits besides economics.
What are the?
Yeah, but if we do a thing for Colburn, we have a lot of people that never even go to Colburn every year, I suspect. Or if we, like Fruita's, whatever their railroad crossing or whatever they did, there's a lot of people in Mesa County aren't going to go down there to use it. I mean, I think that's pretty hard to come up with. That's something that everybody in the community is going to benefit from it.
I think that's when you start getting into those social impacts versus like a direct maybe impact, because like the Riverfront Trail would be a good example, or I mean the library, the things that we do at the Mesa County Library, everybody actually has access to a library if they're a resident here. Whether they use it or not is different though.
Well, I think we can come up with at least one more question. But we have plenty of time to do it. Anything else on this agenda item?
No.
Warned it out. Good. Is there any unscheduled business?
No.
Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second that, John.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. We are in adjournment. Thank you everyone for participating in this virtual meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you guys.
Mr. McGinnis held me up as part of his permanent record.
Okay. Thanks everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks everybody.
See you later.
Bye.